You're watching the left just kind of sucked into the great Trump trap, right? It always works. Why is this? It always works. What happens is Trump does this stuff. He calls people names. He says things that really are quite rude. You know, it's like little Marco for Marco Rubio and Lion Ted for Ted Cruz. And now he's after Maxine Waters with a very low IQ person. Says these terrible things that really are impolite. When the left starts to strike back in kind, when his opponents strike back in kind, they destroy themselves. When Marco Rubio, remember when he went after Trump for the hands thing, he started saying these small fingers, and suddenly Marco Rubio just looked like an idiot. Trump can pull this stuff off. Why is it, and why do they keep falling for it? Well, I would like to put forward a theory in the case of the left. I mean, obviously, we've got this thing that they've been doing where they've they've become violent, they've become hateful, they're surrounding women in movie theaters, throwing Sarah Sanders out of a restaurant. That turned out to be much worse, and we'll get to that in a minute. And the left is sort of trying to get them to stop, but they're trying to blame Trump for it. Nancy Pelosi sends out a tweet. In the crucial months ahead, we must strive to make America beautiful again. Trump's daily lack of civility has provoked responses that are predictable but unacceptable. As we go forward, we must conduct elections in a way that achieves unity from sea to shining sea. I don't want unity in my elections. I want us to argue things out and then vote against each other until we get the people we want. But never mind. The reason Trump is so good at defeating the left, and the reason the left doesn't know what hit it and why it looks just awful now, it looks violent and hateful, is because they have been living off the illusion of civility. The illusion of civility, which is supported by a news media, a Hollywood, an academy that literally does not itself know how uncivil they have been for the last 50 years. What is the worst thing you can call a person in America today? What is the ugliest, worst thing you can call a person in America today? Used to be, when I was a kid, it used to be that you were gay. You know, you called somebody gay. That was really a low thing. You could sue somebody just for saying it, just for suggesting it. Now, obviously, that's a compliment now, but which is fine, no problem. No, but the worst thing you can say about somebody is that he's racist. Okay. That is what they say about everything we think. We say, or bigoted in some other way. We say, you know what? It would be a good thing if we enforced our laws at the border. Well, that's the only reason we want to do that is because people coming over the border are brown. You know, you say, well, we got plenty of brown people. These brown people aren't our citizens. I don't care what color they are. They aren't citizens. They're breaking the law, you know. So if you assume that everything we say is racist, you don't have to argue with us. You don't have to argue. It's just an insult. You know, the Supreme Court, just before I came in, they handed down another one of these 5-4 decisions. Every time I see one of these things, I think, remember when the Never Trumpers were saying, oh, you just think it's good because of Gorsuch. Yeah. Pretty good appointment there, Gorsuch. But another one of these 5-4 decisions in which they said Trump's travel ban is, in fact, legitimate. And the argument against this, the incredibly stupid argument against this, was that because Trump said things during the campaign that sounded like he wanted to ban all Muslims. In fact, at one point, I thought he did say ban all Muslims until we figure out what's going on. That's what he said. Just have a pause in Muslim immigration. But the travel ban didn't actually do that. So you had like Sotomayor saying, this repackaging of the ban does little to cleanse the policy of the appearance of discrimination that the president's words have created. She wanted to knock this thing down on the appearance of discrimination. But everything to the left is discriminatory on what we say. That this is a travel ban. It's very similar to Barack Obama wanted the same travel ban to get countries that have a lot of terrorists to make sure we double check them before they come over into our country. It is not. This is another thing. They call us bigoted when we raise the question, does Islam have beliefs that are antithetical to Western culture? Islam is a belief system. Not every belief is in keeping with Western culture. That is not bigotry to say that. If there were a country called Nazi land, there would be plenty of nice people who lived there, but they would be Nazis. And if they wanted to come in, you would have to ask yourself the question, is Nazism in keeping with Western civilization? No, it's not. Okay. So with Islam, it's fair to ask this question when they are at war with every single person who is on their borders, including other Muslims. It is fair to ask the question, can we inspect this? Can we ask it? But no matter what we say, it's bigotry. So if you say, if you talk about gay people, and obviously, listen, I have come out in favor of gay rights again and again. You guys have argued with me a lot. I respect your opinions. I understand. There's always this tension in American society, in any free society, between individual rights and the greater culture. So, it's not like you write to me and I think, oh, you're evil homophobes. I think, no, I get it. You have a really good point to make. I come down on the side of individual rights more often than I do on the side of the greater culture. I kind of feel like the greater culture can accept individual rights, but I understand your concerns. I get it. But we discuss it. That's why we're conservatives, because we discuss things and we talk about things. But immediately you go to it's homophobia, you're a bigot, you're nasty, and all this stuff. It's the illusion that you are civil. So when Trump starts fighting back, he is fighting back on their own terms. He is kind of like, for most of us, because I'm a really polite individual, I actually am, for most of us, it's like getting the bully at school to fight the other bullies who are picking on you. For 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, we've listened to you're a racist, you're a homophobe, you're a thisophobe, you're a Islamophobe, you're a bigot. It's the nastiest thing you can say about a person. There's no civility about that. It doesn't matter if you put it politely. It doesn't matter if you say it in a soft voice. If every opinion that I have the only reason you can think of I have that opinion is because I'm a bigot, because I hate women, because I hate gays, you are not being civil. You are being offensive and insulting and dismissive and cruel. And when I say, you know what, you guys, because you're NBC, because you're ABC, because you're CBS, your voice is so much bigger than mine. I don't have a voice to strike back with. Oh, wait a minute. Here's Donald Trump. That is not being uncivil. That is being uncivil back. All right. And that's why it works, because then when they come out and they start to attack Sarah Sanders, they're just being who they've always been. When they surround Pat Bondi in Florida and they spit on her and they scream at her, and they're just being who they've always been. So he's exposing them for who they are. That's why it makes them look so bad. This thing with Sarah Sanders was much worse. She goes to the Red Hen in Lexington, Virginia. What was it, 11 East Washington Street, just in case you want to drop in. And she goes there. They tell her to leave, but it was worse. She was with her family. Here is Mike Huckabee, Sarah's dad, telling what happened after they threw her out.
Once Sarah and her family left, and of course Sarah was asked to please vacate, Sarah and her husband just went home. They had sort of had enough. But the rest of her family went across the street to a different restaurant. The owner of the Red Hen, because nobody's told this, then followed them across the street, called people, and organized a protest, yelling and screaming at them from outside the other restaurant and creating this scene. One of the members of Sarah's in-laws who were there, by the way, most of her in-laws, not her mother-in-law and father-in-law, but most of them are very liberal. And one of them walked out and said, look, I don't like Trump. I'm not a supporter. I'm a far considered liberal. But you guys are embarrassing me, and you're not helping the cause. It was ironic that, and he said, Sarah's not even here. You're yelling and screaming at somebody who's not here. This is what the left has been reduced to. It's really tragic.
I don't know if tragic is the word, but it is embarrassing because it's who they are, because it is really, obviously not everybody who votes Democrat is like this, but so many people, because they hang out with only people they know. See, the right doesn't have this problem because we're surrounded by Hollywood, because we're surrounded by the Academy, because we're surrounded by journalists. We hear left-wing arguments all the time. We learn to fight them in our minds. We learn to think back against them. They never hear from us. They do not understand that so much of what they say is offensive. They do not understand how deeply, deeply cutting, mean, cruel, and stupid it is to respond to every opinion you disagree with by calling it racist. They don't get it. And so when he's talking about them chasing a left-wing couple, right? Sarah's other in-laws, right? They're talking about chasing a left-wing couple, and these left-wingers saying to this is, you're coming after your own at this point. And yet, if you go on MSNBC, where the liberals gather, right, they are defending this. They are defending it. Take a look at cut number 1.
If there are babies in cages over here, are you still going to be able to go out in polite society and have dinner with the democratic citizens of your country?
You reap what you sow. The folks who work for him, who are part of this remarkably unconventional administration, and that's putting it as politely as I can on a Monday, I don't think should be surprised at this reaction.
I mean, are folks surprised at what they've gotten? Did they not know what they were voting for in terms of tone, tenor, substance, all of it?
I think the Trump administration lecturing anyone, Trump administration and their allies lecturing anyone on civility is ridiculous. You know what? Let's talk about something that actually matters in people's lives, which is these kids and their parents, and talk less about the treatment of Sarah Huckabee Sanders and more about the children who are dealing with this.
What would an appropriate response look like? How polite do we have to be to people that are putting babies in cages? I would say that we don't have to be polite to those folks. I would say that polite discourse is inappropriate when there are babies in cages.
But she's being incredibly dishonest because there were babies in cages, as they, I love the way they come up with these phrases. They're very good at it, really. Babies in cages during the Obama administration, but Obama wasn't shouted down. None of his people were shouted down. He was the light worker, you know, he was the savior. It's all nonsense. This is just the fact that they don't like the fact that that Trump is doing conservative things and they are working. The country is doing better. The world is doing better. Our foreign policy is working. They just hate, and everything they accuse us of, this is the other thing, everything they accuse us of, they do. This thing about Trump being the authoritarian. Sarah Sanders gives her first press conference after being hounded out of this restaurant, and they say to her, this is cut number 4, they say to her, are you going to do nothing? Aren't you going to do anything about the immigration problem? Why don't you just make a law? Listen to her response.
Congress acts, nothing is actually going to change. The administration is not changing anything right now when it comes to judges.
You mean, are we walking around making up laws? No, because we're not the Obama administration. We're actually trying to enforce the laws that are on the books. We're actually asking Congress to do their part in the process and pass new legislation that will fix our immigration system.
Nothing is actually changing on the ground. Like this, so this is, the president is complaining about judges and saying that we shouldn't have all these judges and people who come over should just be put out. But nothing is actually going to change. He's just complaining about the process as it stands now.
Things that we have the ability to do administratively, we are working to do. But again, Congress is the only one that has the ability to write law, and we hope they'll do that.
So they accuse us of the most vile things simply for disagreeing with them. That's the first thing. They accuse us of what they are guilty of doing. They do that all the time. But the other thing, and possibly the most important thing, is the way they wrap us in the mental prison of political correctness in order to silence us. You know, there was a thing that happened the other day with David Bossie. You know, David Bossie from Citizens United, a guy I know, I like him. He's on Fox News. And this is important. It's important that it's Fox News because it's important to show that it has gotten into the minds of conservatives. And he's arguing with another guy. I don't know who this is exactly, but it's a black guy. And they're having a back and forth about immigration. And listen to what David Bossie says.
Michael Hayden posted a picture of Auschwitz. Donnie Deutsch is talking.
That liberal Michael Hayden. Yeah, that screaming liberal Michael Hayden.
You're out of your cotton picking mind.
Cotton picking mind, brother. Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something. I got some relatives who pick cotton.
Ridiculous.
And I'm not going to allow you to attack me like that on TV.
I'm not out of my cotton picking mind. You're out of your mind. You're out of your mind.
He said you're out of your mind. Gentlemen, we're going to leave it right there.
This is ridiculous. This is what's gone on in America. This is what we're about.
Now, I'm sorry, but the phrase cotton picking mind is not a racial phrase. He was suspended. David Bossie was suspended by Fox for a week because they have to prove to their audience, because the left so owns the culture, they have to prove to their audience that that was not a reference to slavery, which it's not. Cotton picking is a word that people use to get around cursing, basically. So you're out of your so-and-so mind. Instead of you say you're out of your cotton picking mind. It's an old phrase. If David Bossie were a bigot, if he were a racist, he wouldn't have used it. He would have been too careful not to expose himself. But because he's dealing with this man as man to man, he's dealing with a man to man. He said to him what he would have said to me. He said the same thing to him that he would have said to me, and yet they can tar anything. Tar. I said tar. Tar is black. I mean, come on. Are you saying black is bad because it's tar? You know, I mean, come on. They can do anything. And because they have wrapped people in this mental prison, because they've made it, they have seized the linguistic high ground. They can tell us when we've been bigoted, even though we haven't been. That too is uncivil. That, too, is only an illusion of civility. What can leftists say that we can accuse them of being racist? Nothing. When Harry Reid said racist things about Obama, when Joe Biden said racist things about, it was just a gaffe. It was just a mistake. But if David Bossie says cotton picking mind, a phrase with absolutely no racial connotation whatsoever, he's suspended for a week. That's the other thing. That is the other ceiling, the other glass cage that Donald Trump has broken through, and why, when they oppose him, they make themselves look bad, because they are only exposing themselves for what they are.